All right,
Yes.
so Mona is the author of Beyond Behaviors, and that's what we're talking about today. This is such a fantastic book. I think I started reading it last week and I'm pretty much finished with it, but I learned that you'll never be completely finished with this book because it's just so amazing. You just keep going back and back and back for. Yes, Mona is the author of this book, and she is also a pediatric psychologist and a keynote speaker slash consultant, and the author of Social and Emotional Development in Early Intervention. Could you tell us about Beyond Behaviors, like why you wrote it, who your audience was, what was the purpose, the process behind it? Could you tell us that?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, and everyone who's saying hi. And Violet, thank you for what you just said there about your son, and my book, and saying that he strongly agrees with the perspective. Because, on the most basic level, that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book for those individuals and those children and students and teenagers that I saw suffering and misunderstood. And once I could figure out a way to explain that in the language of neuroscience, so that I could get more people listening and understanding it, it was really fun. Writing the book was very fast because it came out of 30 years of experiences as a psychologist and as a mother, and also in hundreds and hundreds of IEPs in which I felt things were just children were being misunderstood. So that's part of why I wrote the book. Another reason why I wrote the book is that I was lucky enough to have my training as a psychologist. After I got trained as a regular psychologist, child pediatric psychologist, I got additional training in something called infant mental health. And in infant mental health, we look at the causes of behavior. So, of course, an infant isn't able to tell you, hey, I'm a little hungry right now, or my diaper is dirty, but they can certainly tell you through their behaviors. And so that's where I got to understand the nervous system of human beings. And that knowledge is critical for teachers and parents to understand and to know, but no one's talking about it yet. And so that's another reason why I wrote the book. I just wanted to give neuroscience, which happens to be so grounded in compassion and love and a new paradigm that is nothing like what we do now. And I wrote a book about it, and I'm just so grateful it's resonating around the world. It's being translated into 5 different languages now. So I'm just so grateful that it's not just resonating to us here in the US, but across the world.
I'm appreciative that you wrote the book. I mean, it is fantastic. I see everybody is tuning in, loving your book. And we haven't even read the book in the book club. I mean, this is not a book that we've read here in the book club, but it has come up so often. And everyone who has read it says it is a must read. It is non-negotiable. And everybody should be reading this book. So they're right.
If enough people read it and enough parents speak out, then we will have what's called this paradigm shift, this shift in how we see challenging behaviors actually take root. So thank you. Read it, tell your friends about it. And we need everyone to join together because our current systems are still outdated, and not because they want to doing anything that isn't supportive of children, but we've had a ton of information come in the last decade that we can just integrate into how we view behavioral challenges.
So that brings me to another follow-up question. Like, what are your future plans for this book? Like, what are your plans to get these concepts, these practices into the hands of the school systems, making our schools better? What are your plans? What trainings do you have coming up? Can you tell us about any of that?
Sure. So we're working on several different fronts. We're working with educators to develop ways of translating the some of the principles and some of the worksheets in the book to the classroom. So right now, teachers and parents can use everything in the book for their individual child, which is what we hope will happen. Kind of like a workbook for each child, because it helps develop a profile of the child's individual differences and what we need to know about every child. That will ideally follow him or her from classroom to classroom, from teacher to teacher. Not literally follow, but this idea about what is unique about this child? What does everybody on the team need to know about this student's needs, about their emotions, about their brain connection? Working with educators, I'm also working on an online course. It'll be a short course on Beyond Behaviors that'll probably come out in this summer. And it'll be affordable, and it'll be just very it'll be for parents and professionals, and then that's going to be our beta to see how we can go further. On a social change level, I am on the board of Lives in the Balance. Do you know of Ross Green's work?
Yes, and I'm hoping to have Ross Green come on as well. And he wrote, or she
Great.
wrote,
he wrote The Explosive Child and let's see. Yes, Raising Human Beings. Yes, he's written so many books. But yeah,
I haven't read it yet. I just bought it.
So if you go to Lives in the Balance, on Lives in the Balance, there's a whole social advocacy piece that's coming up, and they have stats on different states, regulations, and where this organization wants to go. It's very proactive for advocacy. So that is my advocacy piece is there. And then we're trying to get this word out about the paradigm shift on understanding human beings' behaviors. But as you know, with a lot of the parents in your group here, that our most vulnerable children are those who have neurodivergent brains, differences in brain wiring, and many of our children in other dire circumstances, such as our foster children, who by nature of what they've gone through also have different challenges in their brains, because that's what trauma does. So there's a ton. It's on my website. If you go on monadelahooke.com, you'll see a lot of the different things that we're doing. Join us, and I'll keep you posted on my newsletter if you sign up for that as well.
I would love that.
Profectum.org, and that is PROFECTUM, Profectum.org is another nonprofit organization that's devoted to supporting parents and families and professionals working with neurodivergent. We have something called a parent toolbox, and they're free 30, almost an hour-long videos, free for parents on different topics related to how we can support children. So, yeah.
I've been involved in early intervention for 40 years. I'm right there with you on your suggestions and understandings. I have long believed that early childhood mental health is the number one area to support. How do we get the schools, which in my experience are often more focused on compliance, punishment, behavior management, and assuring boundaries, to awaken to this new paradigm?
Wow.
This is who raised me.
Wow, Megan, you're so lucky.
I know.
And so is she. I mean, you're both lucky to have each other. I can see the passion in you and in her. And Barbara, thank you for all your work that you've done over all these years in early intervention. So similar backgrounds. When you work in early intervention, when you work in birth to 5, you have this different perspective too. And how do we get it into schools? How do we get it into our systems? That's a very good question. And honestly, parents and providers around the globe are asking that question. We have a very stubborn paradigm based on the principle of the idea that behaviors are bifurcated into good or bad, which are compliant or non-compliant. And when you have that as your anchor, rather than the different anchor, which views behaviors as providing essential information about what an individual needs, what a child or student needs, you're going to be working at what I call the tip of the iceberg. So in the book, an iceberg, here's like an iceberg. If you see the tip of the iceberg is only about 10% of that big chunk of ice. But down below, 90 to 85 to 90% of the ice is a huge piece, and that's where all of this rich information comes out. So our school education paradigm is working at the tip and working on trying to extinguish behaviors that are non-preferred and reward behaviors that are preferred, which possibly 80, 90 years ago, when behaviorism started to become a very popular paradigm, there was a lot of studies at the University of Washington in Seattle that were promising. Some of them started in animal models, which lots of research starts in animal models. Then it went to UCLA with Ivar Lovaas, and there they did some studies that at the time appeared to be pretty solid evidence, and it took off. So the behavior model went into autism treatment as ABA, and then through our other systems, it kind of joined with cognitive behaviorism and became a many cottage industries around this model. So if you've read the book, I know you have, by Steve Silberman, Neurotribes, you can see that rich history right there. There it is. Yes, Steve, my friend, I love that book. You can read
if you haven't read this book, this will give you the history of why we are where we are now. And Mona's book, Beyond Behaviors and Uniquely Human, I would kind of say that you're trying to undo what has happened. You're trying to undo what has happened in Neurotribes. I mean, he gives the history of why we are where we are.
Yeah.
And Beyond Behaviors and Uniquely Human are trying to fix it. It seems like they're trying to.
Well, what I think.
I'm oversimplifying.
No, you're not really. I think we are trying to fix it. Barry and I have similar perspectives. Barry Prezant and I have similar perspectives, and we have the same editor on our books. It's so cool. And our editor is the father of an autistic adult. So I just feel so connected to him. But I think why I wrote the book is that what Steve Silberman talks about is that there's an old paradigm and a new paradigm. My book, Beyond Behaviors, kind of threw the gauntlet down. That's why it's so long and so dense with science, because it had to be, because I wanted to throw the gauntlet down to say, this is the new paradigm. And in a very compassionate and loving way, because as you know, I'm trying to build bridges, and I have absolutely every belief that educators want the best for children.
They do.
So my educator colleagues and I are just, holding hands. But I had an education that was very rare, and I was blessed to have mentorship with some of the leading people in the field of neurodevelopment, Serena Weider, Dr. Stanley Greenspan, and copious amounts of studying Dr. Stephen Porges's work, so that I was able to create a document that IEP school districts and providers and educators will have a hard time denying, because it is solid, and what we've learned about the brain is solid, And it's where we understand the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University has so much data on this. And so I can feel very confident in saying that the new paradigm is here. Now what we need to do, as Barbara said, is spread the word. So
As
we do
fast as
that,
possible.
yeah, as fast as possible, but we do that by being collegial, by not blaming educators or behavior therapists. Again, we grew up in parallel. We are not communicating with each other yet. And this book is a way to build bridges across so that we can understand what's truly best for each child. And what's best for each child is going to look very different. No two human beings are the same.
You say that we should be viewing behaviors as adaptations that help a child cope and survive in their world instead of something that needs to be eliminated. So we should be looking at these behaviors not just as behaviors, but as adaptations to help them survive, that they have developed to help them survive, coping mechanisms, instead of something that we just want to eliminate altogether. Can you elaborate a little bit on that so that we can kind of get a better understanding of that concept?
Absolutely. So when we consider that behaviors are adaptive, in other words, they serve a purpose, an important purpose for children. And that purpose is not, as many of us are taught and trained and believe, to either get out of doing something, or to get negative attention, or to um, uh, avoid something they don't want to do. Behaviors are actually not coming from those very simplistic causes as we thought, but rather what we know now is that human beings have something called a brain-body pathway called the autonomic nervous system. And you can just think of it as the information highway that is going between our brain and our body all the time. And that information highway is always informing us subconsciously. So it's always informing us about what to do, essentially how to move our bodies, what to say, how to react, how we feel. And when human beings detect that something's wrong, and there's the word for this is neuroception. It's the subconscious detection of threat and safety in our world or in our environment. Then we are we are essentially evolved to do certain behaviors. And some of these behaviors are called fight or flight behaviors. These are the ones that are targeted most often in schools, but there are actually different ranges of behaviors. But these fight or flight behaviors, when children are moving, they may be saying things that are troubling, or they may be hitting, they may be spitting, they may be self-injuring, they may be doing things that look antisocial, but they're not. They're survival. They are stress behaviors that are coming out to help the individual not shut down. So these, what I call in the book, and when after you read it, you'll understand that it's the red pathway. When the red pathway is turned on because an individual isn't feeling safe in their body-mind connection, and for our individuals on the autism spectrum and with other brain wiring differences and with other experiences, sometimes a trigger is completely invisible. It could be a sound, it could be a sensation, it could be a grumbly tummy or gas, but that shifts the mind subconsciously into a move pattern. And the move pattern is what we must respect as, what is this telling us about what the child is experiencing right now and what the student needs, rather
So on
than...
this, yeah, okay. So are you saying, so on a subconscious level, they're trying to protect themselves, that that behavior is basically them going into a more protective mode because they're sensing a danger, or subconsciously their bodies are sensing a danger.
Absolutely. And the body is choosing it for them. The autonomic nervous system, which is subconscious, you're right, Megan, is choosing it for them. It's not a. So you may read the story about one of the students in the book who was rocking very heavily, and then they asked him not to rock in his chair at school, and then they asked him not to rock, and then he started moving sideways, and then they asked him not to move sideways, and then he started kind of grabbing at his aid, and their
Mateo.
behavior. What's that?
Are
Yeah,
you talking about Mateo?
Mateo. Yes, my Mateo, and which isn't his real name, of course. Everything's highly. Oh, there he is. Yes, yes. Everything is not the same name, of course, to protect everyone's identities. But Mateo, and then he got more. He was moving more and more, and he ended up being put in what it was called a calm down room, which was really a large closet. And he went from this movement of adaptation, adaptive behaviors. Help me, people. I can't sit still and listen to the teacher right now. So my body is moving for me. When he was punished for that, he eventually went blue. He just started banging his head against the side of the closet. And so we want to begin to view behaviors as having an incredibly important meaning and value them for what they tell us about what the child needs from either the environment or the adult around the child, or likely both.
That story, it really hit me to my core because I see it. It's like a natural thing for classrooms everywhere. There's a behavior that's happening, and they tell them not to do it, and then Mateo reached out for his aid, and she ignored him. She's like, no, you need to listen to the teacher, and he was reaching out to her for a reason. She ignored him, and he like fell down or something in his chair. Like she moved away from him, and he fell down, and then he was punished.
Yeah.
And it just happens all the time.
It happens all the time. And his aide was a lovely person. She was
Right.
so nice. And she was doing that because she was required to through the IEP. And because he had many of our children have motor difficulties, so he couldn't politely tap her on the shoulder. He was a non-speaker, so he had movements that he couldn't control, but it was definitely his way of seeking help, and he was punished for it. And that was the moment when I looked around the room, and I was basically in tears, and I looked around the room and I realized everyone else was going about their business, is that we were trained to view behaviors in one way and not have much compassion or empathy for them. And that's when I decided that I was eventually going to write a book. And that was about 10 years ago when I saw how Mateo was viewed. I thought, this is happening all over the world probably, and it's just not okay.
Violet says, yes, so agree. My son had a plan in which he had to have nice hands, nice eyes, nice shoulders, nice mouth, nice and calm body. He began having meltdowns and lashing out of the blue. Right. Out of the blue, Violet. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And we know why. I mean, I could take a guess why, because I don't know your son's case, of course, but when we say nice hands, nice eyes, nice shoulders, we are inaccurately believing that the child has intentional control over those movements in their body. And when you tell someone, nice hands, okay, we're gonna reinforce you, we're gonna give you love when you hold your body in a certain way, and you're not wired or able to do that because of your autonomics in real time, Heck yeah. That would send me through the roof too.
Yeah.
And I really believe that is why so many of our non-speakers have explosive behaviors, because they are misunderstood. And they're saying, no, you don't. If I could comply with your wishes, I would, but I can't. And there's a reason. So I'm so sorry, Violet.
Me too, Violet. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so chapter 4 is called Safety is the Starting Point. Okay, and it talks about a child's need. The first need is to feel safe. And I'm going to quote the book. Once a child's relational safety needs are properly met, many behavioral challenges fade away naturally because the underlying reasons for the behaviors no longer exist. So basically, once a child feels safe, their behaviors will naturally, their unpreferred behaviors will naturally subside because they will not be reaching out to seek to seek more safety. And what I see are schools are spending a lot of money on behavioral supports, support staff, FBAs, BIPs, just tons of resources on the back end, right? After we have behaviors, they're trying to scramble to get them, under control so that there are less behaviors in the school. How can schools invest more on the front end to curb that need for the interventions later on? How can schools as systems curb that, just invest more on the front end to curb that investment on the back end? Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. And I hope millions of parents and teachers and everybody ask that same question, Megan, because that is the key question to ask. Right now, we are spending valuable resources on the back end. And the back end is when things get out of hand, and
Right.
when you're dealing with kind of putting out a fire. So there's two problems with it. One, it's too late, but two, the solutions on the back end are not compassionate, and they're not based on brain science. They are outdated. So not only are we're not making good use of funds, we're also using an outdated model. So what do we do to make it happen on the front end? And that's understanding that in the human beings, the neuroception of safety, the subconscious perception of safety, is the driver of what we now know as extremely challenging behaviors. The neuroception of, I should say, the neuroception of threat, not safety, and seeking safety is our bodies moving to feel safe again. So in the districts I've worked in with specific children and students, once you have figured out how to meet that child's safety needs, both from a sensory standpoint, of course, from an emotional standpoint, from somebody like Mateo, having someone come right alongside him and say, buddy, you are not alone. I am here with you. What does that sweet body of yours need right now? Once we realize that we can put personnel on the front end, and the training doesn't cost as much as becoming a behavior analyst, it requires loving connections and a little bit of detective work and figuring out what that child's sensory and emotional individual difference needs are. All of a sudden, the behaviors start to fall away because they're no longer necessary in the child's nervous system. When you have behaviors that are defenses against threat, once you take away the threat, the behaviors go away naturally. And it's just way more, this is the paradigm shift. This is the paradigm shift. When we look at children with compassionate eyes and with a compassionate voice, instead of what Barbara is saying right now, don't you look at me like that. What are you doing? When we look at it from a discipline standpoint, and I understand how easy that is to do because we are inculcated in that way. But if we look at it as the student being disrespectful, when it's not, we've lost the big picture. So
I feel like we just
can,
need to get all of the big mamas in the school system. Let's just get all of the big mamas in there and love on the babies.
love
Yeah.
on our babies and appreciate their wiring, appreciate the movements their bodies are naturally making. Actually honor those movements and don't try to get rid of them, because the message that gives to the child is that you need to try harder. And this is telling them if they can conquer this with their mind, then they're going to be good.
At the very beginning of the year, when I was a teacher, my principal would say, okay, the first week is for routines and rules. We don't teach anything. We get the rules down, we get our expectations down, we get the processes down. But what if in that first week we built relationships and talked about where we are coming from, what things are going on in our lives, what are we worried about, instead of laying down the law in the very beginning. Why don't we build those relationships so that the children know that, yes, you are safe here? I mean, can you imagine the difference that would make?
A huge difference. Can you imagine? The vision. I think you need to start doing trainings on that, Megan. You can start teachers on a new training.
Well, you can hire me when you get your stuff up. You can hire me. I'll be one of your trainers.
All right. Okay. We will go out and shout this to the masses, because, and guess what? You don't have to lose control of your classroom as a teacher and do this at the same time. You can do both. Children like to know that a loving, confident adult is in charge. So we're not saying throw rules out the window, but we are so obsessed with throwing down, I am the, here are the rules, and kind of scaring kids into saying, and if
compliance.
if we're on this compliance and non-compliance bandwagon, we tell ourselves that the children that then we can be nice later. But safety in relationships sets the foundation for all learning and for psychological resilience. So we do that first. And when we do that, the students will know we're in charge because they'll feel safe with us. It's just a beautiful way of setting the stage for maximum learning, is this social engagement with our students.
Compliance is such a push, but support and accommodations are sometimes needed for these bodies to follow rules laid out. Instead of enforcing compliance, let's enforce that compassion. Let's do that.
Well, and what Casey is saying is very true. The accommodations and the support, and valuing the child's sensory motor systems. I mean, I think the accommodations that I talk about in chapter 3 are actually just taking a tabulation of the environment through their sensory systems. That's how all humans take in the environment, through what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we feel on our skin. And in autism and in other conditions of neurodiversity, we have differences in how the world is experienced. So accommodation, and Casey's right, because once the proper accommodation is set in place, the child's bodies are more relaxed, and the child's bodies are able to settle and learn and communicate and ready to learn. Right. But we must remember, right now, the message we are inappropriately giving to many students is that it's mind over matter. It's that they try hard enough, they can do it. And that's not right. That's not okay, because the prefrontal cortex, the top of our brains that allow us to calm down, those connections for many of our students and for experienced challenges in their life, those actual neural pathways are not built yet. So this is what, when you read the book, this is what you will understand more of, that those, you can't ask a student to do something from which they don't have a neural connection yet. You help build the neural connection. And the way we start to build them is through safety and loving relationships.
For those that have not gotten the book yet, so you don't have your book in front of you, I just want to let you know that in the book, there are practical sheets and checklists and like worksheets. This one is a sensory checklist here that are, you can copy and you can give to teachers. Assessing reactions to physical environment, sensory checklists. So it comes with practical things that you can use with your IEP team and that you can help grow your team into a direction that you want to see that team go.
Yeah, you can have a team so that everyone has common goals and common language around this amazing student. So it helps integrate the team's goals from a social and emotional perspective. So rather than having all these separate goals that are cut like a piece of pie, speech and language, cognitive, emotional, all of those are bifurcations. What we need are teams speaking the same language of social and emotional development, because that's the glue that ties, that glues everything together during a child's actual instructional day.
So in chapter 5, you talk about the importance of looking beneath the surface, and she comes back to the iceberg a lot because the iceberg is very important. She has lots of different types of icebergs and there's worksheets for that as well. But you talk about the importance of looking beneath the surface and taking a detailed history, focusing on trauma, past trauma, stress, going all the way back to the pregnancy. And my question is, so like in early intervention, that stuff is very important. They know how important it is in early intervention about what happened during that first year of development, the most important year of brain development, and taking a look at that. But then when we get to public schools, it's as if it doesn't matter anymore. That past trauma and history should have been gotten over by the time they reach elementary school. Does that make sense? Like, why is that?
It's so true, because everybody's history, from the pregnancy on, all of us, right? Essentially from the pregnancy on and into the first 5 years, lay down how our person, how our brain and body is going to encode communication, learning, relationships, everything. So it doesn't have to be a detailed history, but this idea about how has the individual fared in terms of the stresses and the stress loading that the neonate, the infant, the child, the toddler, and the child, what sort of stress loadings has this individual encountered in their life? This is a very important piece for teachers to know about each student. And in the book, I talk about something called an allostatic load or loading and good stress. There's a difference, so a lot of children have experienced different types of stressors. We're going through one right now, right? Our whole country is going through a stressor right now. So children go through stressors. But let's just say you have a child who was premature or had multiple medical interventions, especially ones that were invasive in their first 5 years. And I've worked with a lot of children who have that history, who also have differences in their brain wiring and in their behavioral presentation. This is essential information for everybody to have, because again, it will allow us to figure out both what it means when the individual starts having these behaviors, but also how they may have helped them survive very difficult circumstances when they couldn't move very much and when they were indeed immobilized. That's what, in the first year of life, you're basically dependent on what everyone does for you or to you or with you. And so I think, like you said, Megan, the history of a child is very important, and it should be a part of every child's IEP notes and what their teacher knows about them.
And when you get those, the books you were talking about, the workbooks you were talking about for the kids to follow them through their teachers, I mean, that's essential information that you would obviously put in that book so that each teacher can read through and say, geez, look at what this kid has been through. Look at what this kid has overcome. Look at how this child has adapted and survived this long. I mean, when you look at, right. Instead of just looking at the surface behaviors, you can dig deeper and see, look at these adaptations that this child has developed.
Absolutely. That is so right, Megan. I call it, let's look at this child's and the mama's and daddy's hero journey. Let's look at this hero's journey. Our children, some of them have to go through so much, and we are miraculously made as humans to survive. And once we understand what someone has gone through, we can have so much compassion and empathy for them. And also, if that document follows the child from teacher to teacher and from team to team, then there can be a common understanding about the child's adaptive responses to their world. And then perhaps if a teacher knows, they won't start asking the child to put their name on the board or putting a level drop if the child on the child's behavior chart. If the child starts to do something, then the teacher would move from that to, oh my goodness, hey, buddy, do you want to come up here and sit with me for a second? Seems like maybe something's a little bit going on and your body wants to move. What can I do for you? It flips the narrative. It really, as my friend Ellie Chappelle says, it flips the narrative to a new narrative.
What if every time somebody says behaviors in an IEP meeting, have you ever played the game Taboo?
I've heard of it.
Buzzer? Okay.
No, but okay, no.
Every time somebody says behaviors or non-compliant or defiant, we buzz them. Yeah. Adaptive responses. They're adaptive responses. Okay, now I'm getting silly.
We have to do that because let's stop making behavior a bad word. Let's make behavior a signal word. Right now, because we're stuck in the compliant and non-compliant rut, we have to shift to having behavior be a good word about, alert us. And as Casey is saying right here on the line, she says, it also shifts the responsibility from the adult and the environment to the adult and the environment, and not just the child. I
love that, Casey.
We are loading the child with this responsibility and asking them to do things their body and brain connection is not yet able to do. And that's because we do not have a neurodevelopmental lens. And that's the other thing the book lays out, is how we understand neurodevelopment as part of, and I use the analogy of building a house. So yes, Casey's right.
I had questions about that house as well, but I'm not going to go into that because that's like...
Yeah, we can do that next time.
Next time, yeah. Louisa said, "LOL, I got the taboo." Yeah, that would be funny.
Yeah,
I'm
that
not
would
going
be
to do that, Louisa. So before I get to my last question, I do want to show this one worksheet. So we talk about collaboration and communication in schools. You're flipping the lens again in this book with another communication sheet daily that can be sent back and forth quickly and effectively to help support the child. And it's on page 145 if you do have the book. And it's called Tracking a Child's Stress Load in Real Time. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to tell everybody about it. So one thing, it asks about the child. How is the child feeling today? Because we know, especially with our neurodiverse kids, that can change. They have, sometimes they don't sleep at night. Sometimes, their tummies are hurting. They're anxious. So it asks questions like, do you feel that your child is experiencing extra stress today? Yes, no, explain. How did the child sleep last night? At least 8 to 10 hours. I don't even know why that option is up there, but maybe that's a possibility for someone. Or you can say how many hours they slept, or you can write in there they rocked all night. Is there anything unusual about the child's food intake today? I mean, how important is this, especially when you have non-speaking children, limited speaking children, or even children that aren't able to pinpoint what's happening with themselves? Is the child managing health issues today? Are they having allergies, a virus, constipation, any additional stressors? Is there anything you want me to know today? This is a daily sheet. And if my child had this daily sheet in his backpack, and it would take like 30 seconds to read over so that the teacher can say, all right, today is a good day. It seems like, everything's in order. This might be a great green day for us, ready to learn. Or, hey, this might be a day that this child might need to be low to the floor today to ground themselves. Because in this other worksheet, I know that when they're having a hard day, they like to be on the floor, down low, and that's grounding for them. I mean, the sheets in here are so simple and effective and almost common sense, but nobody's doing it. But I just wanted to show everybody that. And so why is it important to track the stress every day? Can you just briefly say, like, why is this sheet important?
Yes. And I love what you just said. And that is, it seems so basic, but nobody's doing it. And so let me just try to simplify something that's actually quite complex. But every student, every human has what's called a neural platform. So our neural platform is what allows us, and it can be strong. It can be in what we call the green pathway. When we're calm, our body feels good. We're in a good mood. We can learn. That's a good day for teachers to stretch us a little bit and teach us something new, right? But if our neural platform is weak, and many of our students have a hair trigger, it could be, like you said, an hour less or 2 hours, 3 hours less of sleep that night before, and the neural platform comes in weak. It can't hold what is going to happen in the day. And that is why we need to track our children's stress levels in real time as best as possible. And what better way to do that than for this parent to let the teacher know how the child's coming in. Are they coming in hot? Are they coming in cold? Are they coming in pretty good? And some parents have even simplified this on page 145. They've simplified this one to 3 sentences so that the teacher can literally glance at it. We're not asking teachers to take more time, but this communication. I have in the book, I talk about a dad who even would like whisper, once the child was playing with their peers, the dad would say, "It's a green day," or "We're pretty red today," meaning we're in the red zone and expect challenges.
It will benefit you all day if you put that a little bit of extra effort on the front end. It will save you for the rest of the day. It'll save you time, so because you'll know, okay, well, this is what we need to be focusing on today, or this may be a struggle today, so let me save time and maybe we can do some supportive activities, whatever. But it will actually save the teacher time by putting that in on the front end.
It really does. It saves time, and it also makes the day go more smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And intuitive teachers and intuitive parents know when a child has woken up and it's not going to be a good day, right? We know that. And so let's just make it more explicit. But and the reason is that it sets the tone for compassion and not blame. And when we have the responsibility on the adult and not the student, because again, we have to assume, as Ross Greene says, we have to assume that children do well if they can. And when they can't, there's a reason. So it shifts the responsibility, but in a wonderful way, because it just gives us more information, more data, that's solid data, not just looking at the tip of the iceberg, but that's looking at the whole child in a just wonderful way and building them up and helping them have feel good about themselves.
If you could give one piece of advice to parents and teachers of newly diagnosed autistic children, what would it be?
Such a great question. I would say that safety in relationships is the foundation of all learning and resilience in human beings, little ones and big ones. So if we go for the joy, if we go for connectedness, if we go for the child's emotional regulation, the child will benefit and we will benefit. So go for the joy. Remember, the foundation of all learning and of being human is safety and relational safety. That will take you pretty far, and your child will do well.
I love that. Whenever somebody asks me that in a group, I always say, protect your child's emotional health at all costs. And I mean, I think it's kind of the same thing, protect their emotions, make them feel safe no matter what.
Make them feel safe. Help them, teach you how you can help them feel safe. It's care sharing. It's not just one direction. It's both ways. They can, and in our individuals who are non-speakers or have difficulty with communication, we can still do that. We just have to take different pathways till we find that gold, but we will, and we can for every single student.
I love that. This has been epic. This is Mona's book, Beyond Behaviors, and obviously I think that everyone should go out and get it.
Thank you. So I can't thank you enough for your support, for all you do for parents, and just take good care. Stay well and healthy. And thank you all for your comments too. It's been a great hour.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone.